to Must See IMDB, a podcast where we break down IMDb's #1 top-rated episode of a classic TV show, and then we discuss. Did the IMDb voters do the show justice, or are there hidden gem episodes that need a boost up the list? I'm Fraiser.
And I'm Niles.
You may have noticed that our voices are exactly the same because on this show and in Frasier, we're siblings.
We watched a ridiculous amount of television as kids and continue to do so right through today while we drink our wine. We watch, we discuss, and now we're discussing with you.
And we're listening. So if you haven't figured it out yet, folks, we're talking about Frasier this week. A classic television show that premiered in 1993 and ran for 11 seasons.
I heard too that Kelsey Grammer, one of his reasons is that Cheers also had exactly 11 seasons and he didn't want to do any more or less than Cheers.
So the premise is, of course, this is a spinoff of Cheers. So Dr. Frasier Crane has moved from the Boston location of the Cheers bar out to Seattle where he grew up. So he's got his father, Martin, known as Marty, his brother, Niles. They both already live in Seattle. Now, Marty has had some physical problems. He's a retired cop who got shot in the hip, and so he's uses a cane and needs physical therapy. So it's decided that he will live with Frasier. But Frasier is now a radio therapist, and due to his work at the radio station, he hires a live-in caretaker for his father, who is a young British woman named Daphne. We also have Roz, who is Frasier's producer, and they work quite closely together at the radio station and are also good friends. So I think the basic premise of the show is you've got sort of a meat and potatoes kind of a dad figure in Marty, and then you have what I would describe, especially for the time that the show aired, as the metrosexuals. Frasier and Niles are both much more interested in the finer things in life. They love poetry, the opera, fine wines. They drink sherry on regular occasions.
It's kind of an odd couple situation.
And generational and so on. So that's sort of the general setup. Let's head over to IMDb and see what exactly their voters say is the #1 top-rated episode. They say that it is an episode called The Ski Lodge. So this is season 5, episode 14. And we'll have to wait and find out if we agree, but should we kick off describing this episode? What goes down in the ski lodge?
What doesn't go down in the ski lodge? This is a very promiscuous ski lodge that we are in attendance upon here. It's one of those episodes that the show does really well that goes into farce territory. There's misunderstandings and people thinking that one thing's happening when it's not, which just leads to intricate chaos and all these cogs and wheels not turning quite as we expected them to.
Yeah, I think in general, this sitcom has less of a classic sort of sitcom vibe and much more like a one-act play sort of vibe. It's very theatrical. They are not beyond making complete buffoons of themselves repeatedly for our laughing enjoyment.
There's a couple things that I think go towards that. The writers and the creators had a mantra. They called it no stupid jokes and no stupid characters. And yet the ridiculousness, if not stupidity of our characters can get them into trouble. So let's get into this ski lodge. You want to start us off?
So you've got this gorgeous ski chalet set with sort of in the background, many bedroom doors up on this little landing, which is going to come into play later. Frasier sort of stole this free ski weekend from Roz, who's pregnant and can't go skiing and can't sip hot toddies by a fire due to her pregnancy. So Frasier trades her a large screen TV in exchange for this weekend. He takes his father, he takes Niles, he takes Daphne. Daphne brings a friend. At first, Frasier's not happy about that till it turns out she's a swimsuit model, in which case he's thrilled. And they are met at the ski lodge by Guy, their Olympic ski
instructor. He's part of this package that has been won. Also key to the setup is that Martin, Frasier's and Niles' dad, has a head cold, which has made his ears clog up and he can't hear very well, which, as we all know, is going to lead to some Mr. Roper territory confusion.
Right. So almost immediately we have romantic, unrequited love in many directions.
All right, so we have Fraiser, who is very much interested in Daphne's supermodel friend Annie. We have Annie, who has no interest in Frasier, but is instead very interested in Frasier's brother, Niles. Niles, as we all know, is head over heels for Daphne. Daphne doesn't even know that Niles is interested in her still, but is very much excited about Guy, the ski instructor. And it turns out that Guy is gay, and he also is very much interested in Niles.
All right. On the first evening of this ski vacation, Marty makes hot buttered rum for everyone. And they all have a wonderful time, basically getting a little bit drunk. So everyone's inhibitions have been lowered just a bit. And then Marty makes a speech about how he used this hot buttered rum to gussy up the courage and propose to his wife, Frasier and Niles' mom. So he sort of says, oh, it's just such a great way to, go for it. And in life, I don't regret the silly things I did. I only ever regret those chances or opportunities that I never took. So all of these lovesick people are taking his advice to heart to make a move on the person that they are interested in.
Right. So everyone almost immediately retires to their chambers, as it were, only to have a series of doors start opening and closing as one person after the other is trying to get into the room of whomever it is they're interested in without running into yet another person trying to do the same thing.
Yes. So as each person is taking that leap of faith and love, we also have the shock and how to put it? The love continues to be unrequited.
Yeah, I don't think there's any case in which people are like, okay.
There's no other way to describe this except everything eventually gets figured out. No one is interested in the person who is interested in them. They all eventually retire back to their beds.
I suggest we all forget this ever happened and just go to bed. Oh, wait, everybody. Let me see if I can get this straight. All the lust coursing through this lodge tonight. All the hormones virtually ricocheting off the walls. And no one was chasing me.
The only good news is that Marty's ears have popped and now he can hear everything clearly. So that's, in a nutshell, the best episode of Frasier. So let's start breaking things down a little bit. I'll say that I loved the farcical episodes. I think the ski lodge is hilarious. It gave me lots of big belly laughs as if I were at a farcical play. So I think we can all agree that this show definitely still tickles our funny bone. But let's look at how do we view it, all these years later.
Well, one thing I picked up on over the course of me rewatching it since it's aired, because this is another one of my go-to comfort watchings, knowing that David Hyde Pierce is a gay man, and then reviewing some of the things that he's had to act out or say in terms of his lines about gay people or other gay characters on the show, etc. I always thought, is he bothered by some of this, or how did he feel saying these lines? But you, Abby, introduced me to this wonderful podcast called Gayest Episode Ever. It's hosted by, an old college buddy of yours.
Yeah, Glenn Lakin and I went to school together. He's now a screenwriter in LA. And the podcast they host is called Gayest Episode Ever. So they're doing what we're doing. We all bring up these sitcoms we watched religiously as children. Their angle is to look at any episode of a classic sitcom that deals with LGBTQ themes. And so, as I'm sure you can imagine, they have done several Frasier episodes.
Oh, their first episode ever was about Frasier. And I'm so glad you introduced me to them, because I just hopped on over to Gayest Episode Ever, and they had lots of interesting things to say about all of those episodes, David Hyde Pierce, everybody on the show. So I absolutely encourage all of our listeners to go check out their podcast, especially the Frasier episodes, although quite frankly, I went down a rabbit hole and I'm slowly going through all of them. One thing that did encourage me is that every episode that seemed to deal with those issues was typically written by and directed by staff writers and directors who were gay themselves.
One thing that worried me a little bit in the rewatch was, well, first, as usual, there's no diversity on this show. I say as usual, just because it seems to be becoming a theme. As we look back at television history, this show is almost 100% white all the time. And of course, also there's just a very privileged perspective going on. The other thing is how it treats women. What Roz has to put up with as a character is pretty disgusting to me as a woman, the way she's treated by the other men on the show. And even though she has a loving relationship with Frasier, he gives it to her in some pretty sexist ways repeatedly that I found to be a pretty big turnoff. And then Daphne is, she's there as a caregiver. And I feel like that one word is essentially supposed to just sum her character up, caregiving for Martin, but then also a pedestal love object for Niles and not much more. I was a little disappointed in rewatching how little I felt they gave to those characters. I will say that Roz's character, she has power in her sexuality. She gets sort of slut shamed constantly, but she does not let that break her down. She continues to be proud of who she is. So I was appreciative of what she was giving, but I didn't like what she
post Blanche Devereaux and pre-Samantha.
Yes, but I didn't like what she was getting from the male characters. Maybe that's how I should put it.
I definitely found a couple of episodes, and even in my memory, I have episodes where she has she has good storylines, and where she and Frasier really show how mature and supportive of each other they can be. But yes, most of their interactions are somewhat toe-to-toe. And I find it interesting that you say that, because originally this role was given to Lisa Kudrow, and when they were rehearsing the pilot, they thought Lisa Kudrow's reading of the role was extremely hilarious, but they didn't feel like when she and Kelsey Grammer went toe-to-toe in some of these arguments that she was giving back as much assertiveness as he was. So they literally let her go right before the pilot was shot.
Everything worked out fine for Lisa, as we all know.
Yes, mere months later, she was, Ursula, I'm mad about you. And then months after that, she was Phoebe, and we all know and love her.
Well, one thing I wanted to add was we are two women discussing this show, so at least we can offer our expertise as women. You actually sent me an interview with David Hyde Pierce, and he talked about how the show writers were really good at not allowing the jokes to be cruel, that was not their intent. In fact, they worked hard against that. I find it really interesting that he said that. But I went, even though I really did not want to, I went back and watched an episode from season 8, wherein Jane Leeves, who plays Daphne, was pregnant in real life. They did not care to address that on the show. So rather than hide her behind coats and big purses, they just decided to make her get fat. And there's a whole episode where she's, hiding eclairs in the pottery and just can't stop compulsive eating. And maybe that's like a nod and a wink that we all know she's really pregnant, and that's not what this is about. But I found it really distasteful, and a bunch of male writers writing this kind of episode breaks that cruelty rule as far as I'm concerned as a woman.
I did read an article where Jane Leeves, who played Daphne, said that one thing she really liked about her whole experience on the show is that they were a multi-camera live studio audience show, so they would have rehearsals before they taped. And she said that basically after every scene in the rehearsals, the writer of the episode would sit down with the cast and say, okay, so was there anything that wasn't working for you? Like, do you have any ideas? And she's never had a collaborative experience like that since.
So to pivot off of our discussion of the ladies, I'm going to pivot back to the 3 Crane men, because even as a kid, I most loved, of course, Frasier and Niles playing off of each other, but I loved when all 3 of the Crane men were together. So even though this is nowhere near the top, I'm going to throw out as my very favorite episode of Frasier. This is an episode from season 2. It's episode 20, and it is called Breaking the Ice.
The ice episode. I remember this episode years after seeing this show.
So what I love about this episode is essentially Marty always goes ice fishing up at his little ice fishing shack with his friend Duke, but Duke cancels. And so Niles volunteers to go along to sort of get a chance to bond, which clearly throws Frasier for a loop. It's clear that Frasier really doesn't want to go, tries to get out of it. But then when Niles swoops in and is happy to have some bonding time with his dad, suddenly Frasier isn't okay with that either and insists on tagging along.
They're always competing for their father's favor. It's like this leftover kid thing that they can't give up on.
Yes, but there's this other interesting sort of deeper element going on in that Frasier has noticed that his dad has never told him, I love you. They've never shared that expression. So that's really the crux of what all of this is really about. He notices this. And then before the trip, we have Marty saying, "Oh, I love you, old pal," to Duke, who is sick or something and can't go along. Later, he's telling Eddie the dog how much he loves him. And, this only pushes Frasier further to the brink of insecurity about how his dad has never said that to him. So that, of course, is what this whole fishing trip is really about.
Anyway, just because I didn't say it doesn't mean I don't mean it or feel it. Dad, that's exactly what we were saying.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, you could... My dad never said it, but I know he felt it. I mean, feeling is the same as saying it, isn't it? Dad, you don't have to say it. Well, did it ever occur to you that maybe I want to say it? Well, I can't say it if you're looking at me. Well, if I'm gonna do it, I'll do it right. Frasier, I love you. Niles, I love you.
Thanks, Dad. I love you too. And I love you too. But I hate ice fishing.
John Mahoney does that so well. He can go from crusty old beer drinker to slightly tearing up but doesn't want to show it man who's got a lot more going on under there in just a quick turn, and he's so good at that.
Oh, agree. Love him. Just recently rewatched Moonstruck a couple of weeks ago and loved it so much I watched it twice in one weekend. He's luminous, as is Cher and everyone else in that movie, and I highly recommend going to see him in that.
I almost feel like he was, as a cast, he was kind of the glue that kept them all together. During maybe the halfway point of the series, Kelsey Grammer was going through a pretty difficult time and ended up having to go into rehab. And the cast ended up staging an intervention, and John Mahoney was the one that put that all together. He later said it was one of the hardest things he's ever had to do as a life experience. But I just feel like he was kind of like the dad to that entire cast. David Hyde Pierce talked about how he never liked wine and he never liked opera until he met John Mahoney, who introduced him to both of those things because John Mahoney was a huge fan. So I don't know. He just seems like one of those people that, my gosh, I wish you were in my family. What a cool person.
So that's my favorite. It's, again, season 2, episode 20, Breaking the Ice. And I'll just say I stumbled across another episode called The Cranes Unplugged. This is where Freddie comes to visit. This is Frasier's son with Lilith. So he's usually not even in Seattle, but he comes for a visit. He's probably about 11. He only wants to play his video game. He does not want to interact with Frasier whatsoever, which Frasier finds deeply unsettling. And so Frasier ropes Marty into accompanying him and Freddie on a camping trip. So once again, they're stuck in this little cabin in the middle of nowhere. Of course, Freddie wants to do, his own thing once they get there. And it actually gives Marty and Frasier some time to reconnect and to even get some advice on being a father from Marty. And so again, it was just one of those episodes that I really loved, focusing on the Crane men, which I think when it comes to this show is always what it did best.
Well, I have to agree with you. My favorite part of the show was hands down Frasier and Niles one-upping each other and how incredibly ridiculous they could be. And it was just so much fun to watch. I belly laugh at this show so much, which, if you think about it today, comedy has gotten more into cringe comedy, or it's almost so niche now that, smaller groups of people find it to be really hilarious. But oh my gosh, this show, I just could not stop laughing out loud, which I just don't feel like I do very much anymore. So you know how I like to do things. I like to overanalyze, similar to the Crane brothers. But finally, I just went with my gut. It is the episode 3 Valentines, which is season 6, episode 14. It was once again written by Joe Keenan, who told David Hyde Pierce, I just think that you would be really good at doing like a Mr. Bean sort of scene, silent comedy. And David Hyde Pierce was, basically totally on board. So Joe Keenan went back to the writer's room. They cranked this concept out in less than half an hour.
And another fun fact is that Kelsey Grammer ended up directing this segment.
And right before David Hyde Pierce shot it, told him, listen, at no point of this scene should Niles ever doubt that this is all going to turn out okay. And David Hyde Pierce was like, yes, exactly. So basically, it has a couple lines at the beginning where via a telephone call, we know that Niles is preparing for a hot date. For some reason, he is at Frasier's apartment doing this, not his own apartment. And then we just go into basically 6.5 minutes of silence where he notices a crease on his pants. He decides to iron it out. Then there's a thread, heavens, a thread coming out of his cuff. So he goes to the kitchen to get the scissors. He runs back because he sees the iron burning his pants. But halfway, no, I can't run with scissors. I must walk. Eventually, he stabs himself with the scissors. Every time he looks at the blood on his finger, he faints. By the end of it, basically the couch is on fire and there's water everywhere. And oh my gosh, just every moment of this is pure, unadulterated comic genius. In the second act, we have Frasier, who's on an outing with a woman, and he can't tell, she's a business person from his office, and he can't tell if it's a date or just strictly business. Like every time he thinks it's one thing, then something happens to make him think it's the other. So this date/business meeting goes very awry. Virginia Madsen, who was in Sideways, she plays the role and she does a terrific job. She's just fantastic in it. And once again, it's very back and forth. None of us knows what's happening until the very last second of that scene, which way she's leaning on this episode.
Oh, can I just say one thing about that part of this episode? She is in control the whole time, and he is bending over backwards to make sure that he does not make her uncomfortable in any way. So the whole idea of, consent and all that. And of course, the only one getting hurt here is Frasier.
Yes, at no point is he going to be manipulating her into anything. He's being extremely respectful of boundaries. The problem is that he doesn't know what they are, but he's willing to back down at any minute. He just doesn't know. And then the final scene is a really great dinner date on Valentine's Day with Daphne and Martin. They go out to dinner because neither of them have dates. They're each trying to fish for compliments and have trouble giving the other what he or she needs. As a whole, it really shines for all of the characters. And so 3 Valentines, season 6, episode 14.
Great pick. Love that episode for sure.
Some of my other top faves that really feature Niles and Frasier include the dinner party, which is season 6, episode 18, where it's done in real time. And it's them trying to plan a dinner party together as you watch them fumble and get setbacks and then try to proceed. And they have this hilarious thing where they get to blackball possible guests and they're blackballing each other's guests, and it gets very out of hand.
Who else? Oh, wait a minute. You can't just steamroll over me. I want the Birkins.
Oh, I don't?
Well, I do.
All right. We will each have the right to blackball, let's say, 3 guests. We will each get an equal voice.
That's fair enough.
All right, here's 3 for you.
Thank you.
And 3 for me. And just to get the blackball rolling, bye-bye, Birkins.
Right. Well, what about John and Carol Peterson? Everyone loves them.
Not everyone. Blackball.
Why?
No. We never question the blackball. We just bow to its will.
Fine. Nina and Arch Duncan.
The drunken Duncans? Have you lost your... Wait a minute. You loathe the Duncans. You just want me to waste a blackball.
That's insane. I adore the Duncans.
Really? Mm-hmm. Well, then, perhaps I've misjudged them. Very well, Niles. The Duncans it is. Nina and Arch.
Oh, stop it. They're hideous.
Well,
I'll throw in also the innkeepers, where they try and open a fancy restaurant. And it goes, again, as I'm sure farcically you can imagine, horribly, horribly awry.
Yes, the Cherries Jubilee, I do believe, make an explosion in that episode. But another really good one from season 1, episode 24, is called My Coffee with Niles, which is a play on My Dinner with Andre, where they're at Cafe Nervosa, and it's just them having a cup of coffee together at the cafe and talking about various things and having, ridiculous but philosophical conversations.
Love it. Great picks. All right. So I thought we could play a little game.
Ooh, I love games.
All right. This is actually a game you too, listeners, can play along with us, or you can go to BuzzFeed and play there. This is the classic Would You Rather. And once we each make our selections, Kate, I'm going to tell you what the other quiz takers said. So we'll see which is the more popular of the two choices, if that makes sense.
Oh, yes, of course. Let's do it.
All right. Question 1. Would you rather live in Frasier's apartment or in Niles's mansion? I'm going with the apartment.
Yeah, there's no windows in Niles's. Although I wouldn't mind Maris's house. Her house is pretty good. But no, between those two, I'll go Frasier.
All right. We both picked Frasier, and that is overwhelmingly the most popular answer, 67%. All right. Question 2. Would you rather be married to Lilith or Maris? I'm a hard Lilith on this one.
I'm a hard Lilith as well. I read an interview with Bebe Neuwirth, who plays Lilith, who basically said, why does everybody think she's such a terrible person? Like, she's clearly just someone who's perhaps on the autism spectrum. She doesn't try to be mean. She just has no filter at all.
I think she's great. I'd totally be married to her. 72% agree. Lilith is the preferred spouse. All right. Would you rather be best friends with Daphne or Roz?
Oh, Roz. Roz is more interesting to me as a person.
Interesting. I went with Daphne just because every time she is going out to do something with her friends, it sounds like a good time. And this one was very close. 52% Daphne, 48% Roz. So neck and neck there. Would you rather get hit on by Bob Bulldog Briscoe, which happens regularly to Roz, or have an unwanted sex dream about Gil Chesterton?
He is the restaurant critic. I'd rather have a sexual dream about Gil. First of all, the man is hilarious. I read an interview with him where he said, basically, my character is a one-off, but fortunately, I came back again and again, like an unwanted rash. The man is hilarious even in real life. I'm totally going for a sex dream about him.
I did pick Get Hit On by Bob the Bulldog Briscoe because I thought it would be over with more quickly. And Getting Hit On was the winner with 67%.
I stand by my answer.
Would you rather have a cappuccino at Cafe Nervosa or a beer at Duke's Bar?
Oh, Cafe Nervosa. That's not even a real question.
Yeah, I'm same. And that was overwhelmingly more popular, 66%. All right, here's a good one. Would you rather have Dr. Niles Crane or Dr. Frasier Crane as your therapist?
Well, first of all, I'll go Niles because I love him so much. But second of all, he's like in practice. I don't just get my 5 minutes on the radio with him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I also picked Niles. Between the two brothers, he's the one I'd want as my therapist.
Somehow I feel like Frasier's ego is a little bit bigger than Niles's. Yeah, I think Niles can remove himself from his own life enough to focus on you, not just himself.
Exactly. And Niles wins the race with 60% of the vote.
Darn right he does.
Would you rather have a mullet or be balding? Now, I'm not sure what they're referring to here because it seems to me like Frasier is both balding and has a mullet. But anyway.
It's definitely a combo that is occurring, especially in seasons 1 and 2 at the same time.
Yeah. Well, I went with mullet.
I'm going mullet too.
51%. So a nice tie there, really. Okay. Would you rather do it on Martin's chair? You know, his big recliner is what they're referring to, or have sex while Eddie watches? I picked Eddie just because I'm getting older. I don't want to do it on a recliner.
I mean, at least it looks like a comfortable chair, but I'm fine with Eddie.
It's basically tied there too. 51, the chair, 49, Eddie.
In the final episode of the series, the delivery man who comes to take away Martin Crane's horrible chair is the same actor who delivers the chair to Frasier's apartment in the very first episode. His name is Cleto Augusto. And the producers ran around and found him and cast him to come and take that final role. He's the only actor who appeared in both the first and final episodes other than the main core cast.
I love that. What a great callback. Okay. Would you rather get shot in the hip or have sex with Bulldog? I'm for sure going with getting shot in the hip.
I I'm having back problems, which are really not fun. So I'm really thinking about this hard. I guess I'll go with being shot in the hip. I don't know. One night I can't decide. Fine, I'll go hip.
56% agreed with us. We're much more okay with getting shot than having to have sex with Bulldog.
Can I just say that the actor who plays Bulldog seems like a way nicer person than Bulldog?
Oh, I know, but we're not talking about him. We're talking about Bulldog, who is a terrible person. All right. Would you rather have to walk Eddie in the rain or get a bad psychic premonition from Daphne?
Yeah, I'll walk Eddie in the rain.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
I'm not sure that I believe in psychic premonitions, but I don't want to mess around with that.
It's like one of Sophia Petrillo's curses. Yeah, I'm going to go with walk in the rain, as did the voters, 74%. What's a little rain? We all love Seattle. Okay, the last question and possibly the most difficult. Would you rather eat tossed salad every day for the rest of your life or scrambled eggs every day for the rest of your life?
Abby, we would both be salad on this.
We're hard salads. I'm a hard salad on this.
I was just telling my kids, I think it was last night, because they were complaining about, I don't know, their pasta and meatballs. And I went on and on to them about how you and I had to eat beans this, beans that. And how the one good thing about that is that you and I learned to love salad because we also ate salad every night. And that was like the good part of the meal because you could put salad dressing on it.
Oh, yeah. The salad was the treat in our dinners. All right. Well, 60% agree with us. Tossed salad is the way to go.
Well, fun fact about the theme song, because it was never played at the beginning. It always just went over the end credits. They sent directions to lyricist Daryl Finessi. The directives they gave him is that it had to be about psychiatry, but they couldn't mention any psychiatric terms. They couldn't mention Frasier's name, etc. They basically told him everything that he couldn't write about. And so he was kind of like, oh my gosh, what am I going to write about? So he came up with all of these, like odd phrases that sort of had to do with the concept of the show. So for example, tossed salad and scrambled eggs are two food items that you have to really mix up and get kerfuffled. And that was basically a representation of Frasier's, radio people calling in, and they had problems and they were all mixed up and needed his help. I hear the blues are calling. They're all feeling sad and they have to call Frasier, etc. So Kelsey Grammer loved this song. I think they were originally going to get somebody else to sing it, but he was like, no, I have to sing this song. And he said that he'd always wanted to be in a rock band. So he threw in the tagline, "Good night, Seattle, we love you," because he always wanted to be like on a huge stage saying that to a crowd of people. So he figured this was his only chance.
It's catchy. And I often love the sort of end tags they put underneath it for each show.
Oh, well, it was another form of silent comedy because they were all no audio. You just got the song while whatever sight gags were going on in the final tag scene.
Yeah, for example, in Ski Lodge, Annie, the supermodel who has not been interested in Frasier the entire time, finally leaves her room and tiptoes down to Frasier's and knocks on it, but he does not answer. So she forlornly returns to her room, only to see that he went to go grab some donuts from the kitchen and missed her knocking.
There's a million of them.
All right. So any other fun facts before we wrap up?
Okay. Daphne is from Manchester, England, which is where John Mahoney was born and raised until he was 18, when he came to the United States and worked really hard to lose his accent. Clearly, he did a good job.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. I did not know that.
All right. The dog who played Eddie was named Moose. He got far and away the most fan mail on the show by a landslide. He played Eddie for 7 seasons, but then he got too old. So his son Enzo took over the role. He was a problematic dog, and actually John Mahoney really couldn't stand him. During the show, he would always take the first bow during the live studio audience, bow to the audience. And so on the very last episode, as a surprise to everybody, they brought Moose out, and he had all white fur. He had lost all his spots. He was deaf and half blind, but he seemed to perk up and recognize where he was, and he did take his bow just like he had always done for those first 7 seasons.
Oh, that is so sweet. I have my little pup curled up next to me. She loves being a part of our show.
Well, there you go. That fun fact was just for you, Dolly. All right. What I love about the casting of this show is that every actor except for the Roz character was basically pre-approved. when they went to just pitch the concept, they pitched the role of Marty as being a John Mahoney type character. And the NBC president was like, oh my gosh, if you could get John Mahoney, he's pre-approved. So they ended up calling him and he agreed to do it. David Hyde Pierce was cast because a casting director's assistant was going through photos and found David Hyde Pierce, who wasn't even in the running, and said, oh my gosh, he looks exactly like Kelsey Grammer did in his first few seasons on Cheers. Sent it to the three creators. They saw the photo, saw his previous work, and basically were like, we have to create this character. So the brother wasn't initially a character in the series, but they wrote him in because they found an actor who looked so much like Kelsey Grammer.
Yeah, I really do think they look related. Their similarities are uncanny. And what I also find so great about that relationship, you don't often see like two similar characters playing off of each other. And as you mentioned in your favorite episodes, like their one-upmanship, because they are so similar, makes for great TV. Whereas I think the convention is, oh, it has to be opposites for it to be interesting.
David Hyde Pierce, when he saw the pilot script, he was like, wait a minute, you're making me exactly like, this is not going to be interesting. He's like, I'll take the job because this is a great script, but I don't see what you're doing here. And then he said after the first rehearsal, he was like, oh, I see how this works. And, you know, his character almost pushes Frasier back into the quote unquote normal part of the spectrum of ridiculousness. So he was like, I see how this can work. And of course, it went on to comedic greatness. Also, David Hyde Pierce is a trained classical pianist. So every time you see him playing the piano in the show, he is really playing it. Kelsey Grammer is not. So he would just, you know, play a false piano while they, played the music or what have you. And then finally, to tie this to another thing that we know Kelsey Grammer for, he is infamously the voice of Sideshow Bob on The Simpsons. Now, I knew that they had brought David Hyde Pierce in to do an episode of The Simpsons. It's from season 8. It's called Brother from Another Series. And not only do they bring in David Hyde Pierce to play Sideshow Bob's brother Cecil, but during that Simpsons episode, they use the same black title card idea. And they have scenes of Sideshow Bob and his brother Cecil drinking wine in their apartment and discussing philosophical things.
But then what I really didn't know is that in season 18 of The Simpsons, after the series Frasier had already ended, they brought in John Mahoney to play and voice Sideshow Bob's dad in an episode called Funeral for a Friend. He plays Sideshow's dad, who has been imprisoned for 87 years. So I just love that Frasier connection to one of the all-time animated shows, The Simpsons.
Oh, wow.
Well, my favorite Kelsey Grammer scene is in the number 2 episode, Ham Radio, which is season 4, episode 18. He's in the recording booth trying to get this damn radio show recorded, and it's the most hilarious direction of this thing as everybody tries to foil him ever. We already know my favorite David Hyde Pierce, 3 Valentines. My favorite scene with Daphne is it's called Rooms with a View. It's where Niles is in the hospital undergoing a major surgery, and she's keeping it together while everyone else kind of buzzes around her, and finally she loses it at the end of the episode. Talk about tear jerkers. She plays nuance in this episode extremely well, and when she finally does break down, it is the most genuine acting I think I saw from her out of that whole series. She just nailed that scene.
Oh, can I just add one thing? I just watched that episode and they fast forward to as if we're seeing the future now, that Daphne and Niles will have 2 daughters. But in the series finale, they have their first child and it's a boy.
Yes. Another fact that's sad is that they named their boy David. He is named after David Engel, who was one of the 3 creators of the show. David Engel and his wife Lynn were on American Airlines Flight 11 that crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center, and they lost him that day. And that was their way to honor him.
Oh my gosh, I did not, that's, I mean, horrible and beautiful that they did that.
Yeah, they said some pretty loving things about him. Of the 3 creators, he was kind of the shyer one and not as, maybe effervescent, but they said he always had those wheels turning. He was always thinking about everything that was going on around him, and he just brought so much to the show. And then finally, my favorite Roz scene is where she and Frasier have such a genuine moment. It's from season 9, episode 22. It's called Frasier Has Spokane. They have to record a radio episode up in Spokane because it's the latest, radio station that's picked up his syndicated series, but nobody calls in. So they're like, got all this dead air. So finally, Roz calls in pretending to be a caller. And as he keeps fishing for information and she keeps trying to make jokes about, what the situation is, slowly they delve into a real problem that she has. And her way of subtly going from joking to more serious to, inadvertently giving up this information that she doesn't want to give up to breaking down on the call and him helping her and supporting her the whole way. Oh, such a good scene. Last, but oh my gosh, not least. My favorite scene with John Mahoney is from season 1, episode 19. It's called Give Him a Chair. Frasier and Marty are arguing over the chair that Frasier has basically chucked out of the apartment and replaced with this newfangled thing. And Marty tells him why this chair is so important to him. And he lists off every memory in his life that occurred while he was in that chair. And the monologue is so beautiful and a perfect example of how much John Mahoney can do with so very little in terms of words, but just his face and giving it all away with emotion.
Yeah. And then the final series finale, Frasier puts his newfangled chair back in the spot where Marty's chair was. And Marty comes over to visit and he's like, oh, actually, this is pretty comfortable. I would have been fine in this chair the whole time. So there you have it. IMDb says the very best episode of Frasier is season 5, episode 14, called The Ski Lodge. But I, Abby, disagree a little bit. I like shows that focus mostly on the Crane men, so I'm going to go with Breaking the Ice from season 2, episode 20. You can also check out the camping episode, Cranes Unplugged, season 8, episode 10.
This is Katie, and my favorite episode, because my favorite character is Niles by a landslide, is Three Valentines, season 6, episode 14. I also like The Dinner Party, season 6, episode 17, and My Coffee with Niles, season 1, episode 24.
Very sadly, we were met with the news this week that Bob Saget, who played Danny Tanner on Full House, has passed away. And so we'd like to segue from Frasier into Full House. And I think, believe it or not, there might even be some themes there that match up.
Oh, absolutely. Multiple generations of a family, these generations living under one roof.
Father figures, no moms around.
Absolutely. Although, we're moving from Grey Poupon to saccharine sweet and low.
I'm more like Cheese Whiz, but okay.
That too.
So this is a great time to just go back and take a look at some of those old episodes.
And to honor Bob Saget.
Yes, we'll toast to Bob Saget, have some fun watching those, and we'll meet you back here in 2 weeks to talk all about it.
See you then.